Trouble in the pits, the car's in bits, and Robin barely fits. It's June 1993, and Yesterzine is racist. By which I mean the most race, not the... oh, bugger.
YouTube sent me this. Not sure why. It was very nice of them, but I'm not sure they understand this channel. I don't film stuff that professionally. I started this live section to explain something about the history of the channel, and now it's in danger of turning into a Timberwolf intro. And he does them better than me, by which I mean worse. Screw it. I'm going to read this overtly from the screen, like a professional. It's not like there's any chance I'm looking at the right part of the phone anyway. Because this show has a problem. The Commodore 64 is a fabulous home computer, despite its understated ideas of colour, and the insistence that most of that colour should be brown. It's definitely in the top 4 of commonly seen UK 8-bit micros. But on this show, we've mostly seen it attempting to do arcadey racing games.
Our first encounter with the machine involved the Commodore 64 conversion of Chase HQ, which was advertised like this. And looked like this. And still managed to move like its titular American cops had shot it in the knees, and of course we know American cops never shoot to wound. More recently, we saw Cisco Heat, a wonderfully scenic game in the arcade with excellent views of California and confusingly absolutely none of weapons-grade networking equipment. The C64 version by comparison was a plodding mess with identikit scenery and enemy cars that changed size on hills. Its best feature was that I finished it on my first go about a quarter of an hour after booting it up for the first time, and thus never have to play it again. And it's not just games with the initials CH. WEC Le Mans has made an appearance, but it too was awful, with a track that does not seem to obey standard Newtonian physics. The only bright light was a semi-reasonable version of Outrun, although with a weird system where you have to pre-book your route before you start based on which version you load. Thus it's not the version you'd ever choose to play if you were sane, especially as our hooky Italian magazine copy managed to have only one of those routes on the tape. And also claimed to be called Test Drive, but that's another story entirely. So we're left with a position where one of the top 10 computers of its generation appears to have no good driving games. This feels unlikely, and so we turn to the late-era C64 Bible Commodore Format. This is issue 33 from June 1993, very much the tail end of the 8-bit commercial software market, and it claims to reveal the best driving games ever on the format, under the slightly iffy heading of Race Riot. So we're going to play all 5 they pick as top of the range and see if we can rehabilitate one of the best 64 computers ever sold by Commodore. And excitingly, there's the return of an old friend with the 73% trials. But first, having seen previously how Spectrum magazines were handling the situation, as the 8-bit market's embers start looking awfully chilly, what's in a surprisingly large page count magazine? CF33 is still a very healthy 68 pages in mid-1993. It's £2.50 and comes with 4 full games on the cover tape. For comparison, the also £2.50 Your Sinclair has just 36 and 2 full games on the tape. Of course, one of those games is 3D Death Chase, one of the great Spectrum arcade games. Although Your Sinclair's claim for it to be the best Spectrum game ever is a hard sell, to the point I'm pretty certain the author of that top 100 intended that to be a joke. Feel for Your Sinclair though. The lifestyle section they hoped would save the magazine is now a single half-page media roundup. The back page advert is now the front cover, but backwards, and it would be dead inside 3 months. Amstrad Action is £2.95 and 60 pages, but is giving away £30 of software on a tape they're already calling the Classic Collection, because they know which way this market is going. The £30 of software though is a system for predicting horse races, so I'm going to leave that right there and head back to the Commodore 64, one of the all-time top 100 computers with a 6502 in it. Before we get to our candidates for Commodore Racing Redemption, Claire's having a think because she thinks she can create the ultimate driving game by combining other existing games, and I want to see how she does. It's been 32 years, maybe someone has made it. Decision 1. Do you go for top-down or 3D? Obviously, living in the future as we do, this is an easier choice. There's no way the ultimate driving game now is going to be 2D. There's still a few of them about, notably Circuit Superstars and Gene Rally, but even the indie driving games like Super Polygon Grand Prix are generally 3D affairs these days. Back when the 3 in 3D often also meant the frame rate, it was more of a debate. Nonetheless, Claire's gone for 3D and for cockpit view 3D at that, a future-proof suggestion which makes sense if we're going for the ultimate game. Technology restricts her next choice too, how to handle multiplayer. It might seem weird to have it this early in the feature, but given the old saying is that the first motor race happened 5 seconds after someone built a second car, competition has been part of driving since day, well, 2, I suppose. Claire ends up choosing the horizontal split screen as the way to do it, and at the time she's probably right. Now, we can do online races with 60 cars without blinking, at least on PC, meaning that in endurance length races you can ask up to 200 people at once whether they got their license free in a box of cornflakes.
Another reference that makes more sense in 1993 now I think about it.
Environments then, and Claire's fed up of driving in circles and wants to feel like she's getting somewhere. A fair point, and even back then it was broadly possible, with games like Outrun Europa giving you a cross-countries experience in exactly the way that Cisco Heat should have and didn't. That said, she does then finger Lotus Turbo Challenge and its closed-route circuits as what she wants to broadly base the design on. There's a good discussion next on what vehicles she wants to use, adding bikes and even trucks into the mix. Truck racing is bloody excellent in real life and not especially well served by racing games, so she's got a point. The most recent attempt, International Truck Racing on C64, is called out in this feature for being abysmally sluggish. As she says, driving has to be made more fun than taking a Mini Cooper around the M25 at 5:30 on a Friday afternoon. So she's sticking with the Lotus. Side note, at this point Claire technically makes a mistake, saying pit stops are needed because you won't find any Esso stations at Silverstone. Your Yesterzine racing nerd fact of the day is that there actually is a Golf branded petrol station just behind the pit garages. Her point though is that if you have to pit, so should your opponent. This is true in modern sims, but was rarely so in the more arcadey 8-bit games. Further to that, she thinks the ultimate driving game should have crashes, but also invulnerable cars, that you should have the mechanism to upgrade your car and it have a noticeable effect on them. Also, that while pickups are okay, it should not be the point of the game as it is in, say, Stun Runner. You know what she's describing, don't you? She wants Forza Horizon. A big open world game with hundreds of cars, real world adjacent locations, point-to-point racing, multiplayer and opponents who broadly run to the same rules you do. Plus as many violent crashes without a game over as you can handle. The discussion on type of car is over too, because Forza has them all, including the trucks. In fact, if you choose the fourth one, it's set in the UK, so while you don't get the M25 as such, you can certainly spend your evening working out your anger related to it. It's 1993 though, and Forza is but a glint in Dan Greenwald's eye. Even Test Drive Unlimited, the true pioneer of the genre, is 13 years away. Nonetheless, Commodore Format have picked 5 racers they think are the top of the C64 range. 2 of them we've seen before on other formats, the other 3 are new to me. Mercifully, absolutely none of them are arcade conversions. So we'll start with the game Claire took most from, Lotus Turbo Challenge, and given that most of us these days will be coming from knowledge of the Amiga version, the intro is relatively promising. The SID chip is gamefully attempting a decent version of the theme, and the stats gallery from the big boy versions is preserved. So 2 appears to be the game structure. This game, unlike the later versions, is a straight championship affair over increasingly difficult courses, and much like your mum on a pub crawl, increasingly longer lengths. To be allowed to continue, you will merely have to finish in the points, i.e. the top half of the field, in each race. In-game, we're already a level above anything we've so far played on the channel. This is Lotus. It's got Lotus's handling, it's got Lotus's frame rate, and commendably the huge 20-car field also survives the port intact. It's even, although I accept I'm grading on a curve here, relatively colourful. You will have noticed it's only using the top half of the screen though, with an image of a second player in the pits. This though is a compromise for single player speed that even the Amiga version of the original made, correcting it with the second Amiga, which was the first Mega Drive version of the game. Like the Amiga version, the 2-player mode does survive and will use the full screen. Later Lotus players will notice other flaws. All the opponent cars are the same colour for instance, but again, same as the 16-bit version. Less like the 16-bit version is the way the track breaks up on hills, but at least unlike Cisco Heat, they don't also treble in size. Which is lucky really, because the biggest gameplay flaw in this title is just how wide the opponents are compared to the track. Racing in this game is less about racing and more about just avoiding the opponent cars, because of course any hits push you back several places as you struggle to regain speed. It's this flaw that basically invalidates manual gears mode. It's already mostly for show, as you'd spend the entire race in top gear in an ideal world anyway. But with the controls forcing you to brake and fire to change down, you lose so much speed doing that, any advantage is already gone. It's not helped, of course, by Lotus's implementation of the only you are subject to physics model. Your opponents will drive through barriers with absolute impunity and will not be affected on speed no matter what the collision. This is magnified by some robust collision detection, which combines with the narrow tracks and wide cars to make passing often a crapshoot. Crucially, it also ignores Claire's insistence that pit stops are a thing that should be applied equally. This becomes obvious in my third race, where I mistake my fuel gauge for the race progress indicator and run out of fuel because I hadn't stopped. But then neither had anyone else. Still, it's a league above. This is a coherent racing game that makes less compromises from the Big Brother versions than you might think. It's still entirely playable. It's not what we're looking for though, because there is no world in which this is the version you want to play. The Amiga version of Lotus 1 is better. The other games in the series are better, and the sister Top Gear series has at least 2 better games. So yes, the C64 had at least one good racing game. That's excellent news. But we'd like something the C64 can call its own. And we may get closer with the next game. Stunt Car Racer is to me, and probably you, an Amiga game. And it was a fantastic Amiga game, prompting Amiga User International to give it 100%, which somehow was only the second highest score they awarded in that issue.
It's a long story, okay?
But Stunt Car Racer is by racing game legend Jeff Crammond, and was his second game after single-seater simulator Revs, which was a BBC Micro and C64 game. When it came to Stunt Car Racer, C64 was the lead development format. It's the Amiga and others that technically have the ports. Maybe the original version is the best. When said Amiga version appeared on this show, I remembered how good it was to drive, and my concerns were mostly long-standing ones around some of the gameplay mechanics. We'll get to that though, because it'll all be irrelevant if the C64 version is a stuttery mess compared to its 16-bit younger brother. The good news is I don't even have to tell you, you can see it's not. The C64 is plagued with racing games where frames come along less frequently than a rural Sunday bus service. This is not one of them. Your Stunt Car Racer has a top speed of 200 plus miles an hour, and you'll believe it. There is a trade-off, of course. It's brown. Of course it's bloody brown. It's like they're trying to suck me into yet more of the jokes that'll have the angry C64 owners writing in using their pastels. Have you any idea how difficult it is to read a death threat that's been written in mustard yellow on brown paper? I'm the real victim here. Handling though is spot on. This is every bit the other versions I've played there. The frame rate might be giving up a tiny fraction to the Amiga, but the gameplay is there. The course designs even appear identical. If you had a C64 and didn't have this, I want you to go and have a long hard word with yourself. But still, having just said it's giving stuff up, is this the same as Lotus and this isn't the version you might want to play? Well, maybe it is, but it's nothing to do with the game as such, just my copy of it. Because the big problem with Stunt Car Racer as a game is the damage system. The damage is shown by that line creeping across the top of the display, and it's tough. Even on this practice, it's going to get a disturbing distance across the screen in 3 laps. It does at least reset between races, but what doesn't reset are the holes that can be caused by big crashes. Get one of those and it's there for your entire career. A few of those, and some of the tracks with big jumps, or worse, movable ones, become borderline impossible to get round without wrecking. This hacked C64 copy has an option to turn off damage the main game does not. Yes, you lose the standard damage too, but it's worth it because it gives you half a chance of getting to Division 1 with a car intact enough to survive there, and thus, as a game, this cracked C64 version is better than the Amiga one.
Unless of course someone finds an Amiga version with the same cheats and then we're back to square one.
Which means we turn our attention back to the three that are at least considered primarily 8-bit games. In fact, none of the three appeared on CPC or Spectrum at all. 2 are C64 exclusives. So we'll start with the one that isn't. PitStop 2 by Epix, which might as well be one in the UK. There's a CJ PC version, Apple II and Atari 8-bit versions, but nothing on anything that made the slightest UK impact. Those names though will suggest the other reason this is going first. By the time Commodore Format came along, this was ancient, being released in 1984. To its credit, it doesn't look like it as such. It's a perfectly nice looking game which uses lines and curbs, neither of which exist on the real Brands Hatch track in the way displayed, to give a convincing enough sensation of speed. What also doesn't exist on the real Brands Hatch, by the way, is this start line, which the game has moved for some reason halfway round the track from where it traditionally resides. I think what's happened here is that the C64 needs the pits to be on straight track, and the start straight at Brands fails the Trades Descriptions Act on that basis. This is built to be a 2-player game. Like Lotus, it will show you 2 views, but even in 1 player it'll give you a specific opponent, and I immediately see Claire's point in including it for its multiplayer potential. Even with the daft as dirt AI, I'm having great fun forcing him into other cars and then not using the turbo to let him catch up before doing it again. Credit to the game that the computer player is both not perfect and will crash without your involvement, and I could swear at times was also trying to block me. PitStop 2 also makes the sensible decision to not have fatal car-to-car collisions, and this is the masterstroke that'll finalise it as a sensational 2-player game. If you get a sibling or friend in on this, it'll also be Mario Kartian in its potential to cause arguments, and it's nearly a decade older than that game. My battle with the CPU player seems to end when he goes for an unnecessary pit stop. I know you can complete this race without, but that too proves Claire's point that if you have to pit, so should they. And it works out for him because I'm busy watching his exploits when it turns out that in PitStop 2 you can't crash into other cars, but you can in fact crash. Sensational. No argument with Commodore Format here at all. Even at 9 years old, this deserves to be in a top 5, and even now this is a pure 2-player racing experience anyone can have a go at and almost certainly have a laugh with mates. It goes straight in a top 5, and with the greatest respect to the Apple II, is effectively a C64 exclusive in the UK. Claire says Slicks was included for its role as king of the overheads, and very few would debate Codemasters hold that title, just for Micro Machines rather than this game. Slicks comes along right in the middle of this, having been released after the NES Micro Machines, but before the many conversions of that game. Slick's 2-player mode shares the single-screen point space structure from Micro Machines, possibly because of that, although as we previously discovered, both games stole it from elsewhere. Slicks, as mentioned, is a genuine C64 exclusive, being produced for Codemasters by Digital Design, a company who produced 13 games in 5 years, mostly for Codemasters and Hi-Tech, before moving on to other things. It wasn't even their first overhead racing game for Codemasters, following Mean Machine. The perils of doing research ahead of time here, as Commodore Format described Mean Machine as okay in a very average sort of way. Slicks though they liked a lot better, and that's my impression on booting the thing up. It's an interesting if cut down F1 mechanic featuring 6 real teams from the early 90s. The races involve a 1-lap qualifying followed by a 3 or 4 lap race in championship mode. And it's actually quite tough. The manual counsels you that if you can somehow keep your foot down the entire time, it's possible to earn a higher top speed. And I realised quite early on why it presents this carrot, because there's the stick that one tiny mistake and your car is on fire at the edge of the track, and there is no respawning. The other realistic part of Slicks is that the cars have different performances. For instance, the Benetton you always start with has a top speed 10 miles an hour higher than the Ferrari being driven by Jody here. This is important because Slicks doesn't just swipe from Micro Machines. Sega's lawyers, close your ears, because the team management from the 2 Mega Drive Super Monaco Grand Prix games is here too. Before any race, opponents can be challenged, and if you beat them, you get their car. I discover this when Jody does just that, beats me when I crash on the last corner of the race, and steals my lovely Benetton from me. Still, this means I get into a Ferrari, realistically a horrible car in 1992, just before the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. I will recover the Benetton later in the season and do just enough to get off the bottom of the championship table. Driving wise, it's good enough to handle it too. The tracks are wide enough, the car's quick enough, and the game is forgiving enough of car-to-car collisions to not be frustrating. Something that's needed, because if you bounced off opponents into one-hit kill scenery, you'd be frustrated immediately. The career mode is a masterstroke in many ways, although it appears to be single season, and it's starting you in the 5th best of 6 cars means that winning the championship is always going to be a difficult task. Some flexibility would be nice. It also isn't immune from the C64 driving game-itis, in that at times the scrolling stutters like a 1920s petrol engine. Still though, it's solid, it's fun, it's interesting, and it's something the C64 gets to own. At a budget price, you'd have been incredibly happy with it. System 3 is not a name I expected to see in a top 5 driving game list. As publisher-developer, they had their highlights sure. Putty and Last Ninja are theirs. But to me, all their driving games were generic at best. Ferrari Grand Prix Challenge on NES and Game Boy. It's okay. Motor Siege is damned on Moby Games with the praise basic vehicle combat game. And almost sarcastically, their other driving game of 2003 was Groove Rider, a slot car racing game that makes Motor Siege look like BeamNG. And if you don't know BeamNG, then rest assured that in itself proves my point. Moby Games pops up again to describe it as aimed at the budget casual market. Their last 2 driving games are the closely related Ferrari Challenge Trofeo Pirelli and Supercar Challenge by Eutechnics, kings of driving game half-arsery, and a company I really need to make an excuse to look closer at one of these days. Moby Games blows its credibility at this point by somehow describing it as a remake of the completely unrelated Sega arcade game F355 Challenge, a claim for which I can find absolutely no supporting evidence, including playing the game. And a claim which also ignores that the developer previously made their own Ferrari-based game. In any case, Turbocharge is a very different thing and also the first driving game System 3 produced. It, though, entirely borrows from others. 3 years newer than both of them, Turbocharge is the bastard child of Taito's Chase HQ and Fire and Forget. The joke of the colour palette is wearing thinner than a Poundland jumper at this point, but look at it. It's like they're going out of their way to follow the stereotype. Actual brown is slightly less brown. On the plus side, the well-drawn but so-so brown scenery moves at a decent pace, certainly eclipsing either its inspirations on the platform. There's a lot of stuff to keep track of here too. Each mission occurs in 2 stages. First, a race for the border, then apprehending a Baden. Along the way, you have to manage time, fuel, ammo for the big weapon, damage, and the route you take. It's a lot of stuff to keep track of at once in an arcade game. The only one of these with an automatic replenishment is the damage, which is repaired between the 2 halves of the mission at the rate of 1% for every person you murdered. Fuel can be replenished with pickups in the middle of the road. So points for killing literally everyone on the road, including the police, a goal to storm through presumably international borders, but then apprehending the fugitive that the police presumably were already after. Are we the baddies? While that scenery moves, some of it is weird. The portraits of your own car on big billboards is one thing, but these houses are so out of place that in modern circumstances I'd assume they'd just got them in a big Humble Bundle asset pack and slapped them down. The turn markers are comically house-sized too. You have time to ponder this because of the other major drawback of the game. The loading times are near comical. It's 1 minute, 17 seconds in the middle of the first mission just sitting there watching disk access. That came after only 1 minute 40 seconds of gameplay. It's like watching YouTube without a premium account.
YouTube have the chance to do the funniest thing at this point.
The game also starts again instantly with no warning, so you have to be paying attention the entire time. It ramps up the fun significantly later on as it starts throwing some proper enemies at you, including helicopters which fire at you, and even more disturbingly can fly through tunnels. The tunnels, though, provide the other source of my initial frustrations, although I then realise this is entirely my fault. There's no signage with these splits in the road, but if you choose wrongly, you will slam straight into a wall. I spent most of my first game thinking this was distressingly random, but the trick, excellently, is simply to watch the traffic. They will of course all go the way that will not turn them into Wile E. Coyote. As you can see, I go the opposite way to my prey and get what I deserve. Even with this, the level lasts 2 minutes, and is followed by 1 minute 40 of loading. My feelings on this game are complex. There's something here. It's a good game, sure. It doesn't fall into any of the obvious C64 arcade game traps either, other than the colour thing. But Commodore Format are asking me to buy this as a top 5 driving game for one of the longest lived, best supported gaming formats of all time. Is it? It's an arcade game at heart, but it's also finicky with way too many things to keep track of, especially once the game starts throwing mines and road-based obstacles at you. The handling is acceptable, but nothing more than. Shooting is mostly satisfying, but feels like it's lacking something, and fundamentally, while it's at least a 6-trick pony, it's deploying all 6 at the same time. People liked it. Commodore Format gave it 93 on release, and that was less than Zap. 2 months from now, they would still give the budget version 92, but even they note the loading. Zap's successor Commodore Force would also be positive about the budget re-release. The dissenter here is the always unpredictable German magazine ASM, who make some good points, describing the actual driving as too easy, but also stressing the too many things going on making taking at least some damage an inevitability. 33% is absurdly harsh, but they are tuning into my feelings. It's thrown me rather. I'd describe the previous 4 games as all winners. I was about to absolve the C64 of its reputation as a home for crappy arcade driving games and apologise for past comments. But the claim is this is one of the 5 best driving games in existence, and I'm left thinking, is this it? You might have to help me in the comments here. Did Claire throw this one in at 4:50 PM on a Friday so she could go to the pub with the team? Or is this really the end of the depth of decent driving games on the Commodore 64? Post your defence in the comments and we'll let the people decide. For now, yes, I like this. I'd love a 16-bit version, but tellingly System 3 cancelled an Amiga port because they didn't think it was good enough. Right now, what I have here is a game that screams 73% to me, and that prevents a meaningful conclusion to a section I was certain was going to be a slam dunk. Although, speaking of 73%, Yesterzine longtimers, tune out for 30 seconds because it seems fair to explain this. In a late issue of Amiga Power, they made the point that the lowest mark you could give a game and not get an angry call from the PR people was 73%. So it becomes the mark you give a game if you don't want any hassle, but also don't want to mark it high enough for anyone to think you're recommending a purchase. It's the mark you give if you couldn't be bothered to play the game. It's the mark that accompanies the ultimate review cop-out, if you like this sort of thing, you'll like this. Years ago on this channel we did a series where we put these reviews on trial, and if I recall correctly, half of them were a bit off. None of those reviews involved Commodore Format, and Amiga Power had not published that article at this point. Nonetheless, CF's rebrand, which kicks in with this issue, turns them into what at times seems like a tribute act to its big sister brand. The Race Riot sting on the cover, which we dealt with before, certainly has an AP-like feel to it, and much of the design resembles a slightly more playful version of Power, even down to the "would like to thank" blurb each staff member gets. Features like the early warning scanner for such new releases as were still approaching, and changing the magazine name each page for a joke, are both also things I'd absolutely expect to see in AP. It's a good redesign, and far beyond anything any of the other 8-bit computer mags ever did. Amstrad Action came close, but that's not a surprise, as the 2 titles' staff would gradually merge from this point, to the extent that by the time they were both 24 pages, they were essentially being run as one project. The definitive Commodore Format archive, which I am astonished has taken this long to come up, makes the point that CF had already outlived initial predictions, and sales of nearly 45,000 were absurdly healthy. This meant their 68 pages were almost a curse, as they were struggling to find enough C64 to fill them. Trenton Webb, the editor, decided to push more in the direction of abstract action and make it more of a general enthusiast read. There's a feature on making sprites, for instance, that would have been out of place in a games magazine. That racing games feature on the cover was the first time in the entire run the magazine didn't lead with a big new release, although both Lemmings and Sleepwalker could have qualified, the former being used on its release a few months later. The letters section runs to nearly 10% of the editorial space, and the game's tips section is a full 12 pages. There's also their continuing dev diary on Mayhem in Monster World, which they covered every month for a full year, before awarding it 100% in a review I got comments for calling contrived, despite my evidence being the then editor saying so. There's also the results of their readers survey, something a magazine wouldn't always waste space on, but hey, we've got space to waste. In fascinating insights, it reveals that 98% of readers of a Commodore 64 magazine own a Commodore 64, 3% had a C128, and exactly 0 people admitted to having an SX64. Confirming the audience skews younger than the Amiga, nearly 60% are under 16, which accounts for some of the design decisions. Probably a lot of those 64s are very welcome hand-me-downs from parents and siblings. Even so, people are moving on. The most popular other machine for people to own is a Game Boy, which makes perfect sense, but in second place is the Sega Master System.
Can I just shock you? I like the C64, despite what I said earlier, and in previous episodes, and constantly for 6 years. At any one time, I have 9 C64s in my house.
There's a good number of reviews really, including the aforementioned Sleepwalker and WWF WrestleMania, a much bigger deal before they decided good marketing was employing people who should not be there, and we all know why. I promised a 73% though, and here it is. Codemaster's sequel to Super Robin Hood, Robin Hood Legend Quest. Like the previous game, this is by the Oliver Twins, and the music is from one of this show's favourites, Alistair Brimble. There is additional interest for us here though, which once again makes it look like I plan these things a lot more than I do. Robin Hood was converted to C64 by Ashley Routledge and David Saunders, respectively, the programmer and designer for Slicks.
Damn, I'm sometimes good after the fact.
So let's convene a 73% kangaroo court. We'll play the game for the 20 minutes that Amiga Power joked about, and then we'll see if the review goes any deeper than we have. As part of my love for the C64, which I believe you'll find has been consistent for many years, I have to say the look of this works. Lincoln Green is a colour the C64 is capable of, and Medieval Castle is a colour palette that it's suited for. Robin Hood itself doesn't stray too far from the Oliver Twins tree. It's a puzzle platformer. In this case though, the puzzle is creating the platforms. There's no use object with object stress like in Dizzy, you simply need to find the keys to open the doors and start platforms moving to access new areas. In your way, predictably, are badniks, mostly in the form of men in uniforms whose colour signifies how many hits with your trademark bow they will take to dispatch. There are also some that are impossible to kill, be they gargoyles or whatever the hell those little dudes are. Robin apparently cannot fire the bow while crouching. As a design I already like it. The castle is well laid out, excepting when I failed to notice a ladder and thought I was stuck. The enemies are predictable without being easy, and the patterns are learnable. Their previous Robin Hood game was notorious for being difficult, and I can see this going the same way. There's precious little time between shots from the enemies in order to make transitions, and you only have 3 hearts per life. Replacement hearts are available, but they're rarer than good Atari-based business plans. Worse, you only get 3 lives to finish the game. And the thing about a hard game, especially one that's stingy with your chances, is that the controls need to be absolutely 100% tight, and it becomes obvious in the second half of my brief playtest that Hoods are not. I failed to shoot too many times. I failed to leave a ladder too many times. Too many jumps seemed to be fluffed. Too many chains were not grabbed. This, I feel, resulted in more of my health loss than anything else, and would be infuriating if I were playing this on a real C64, as Commodore Format would have, without the benefit of the infinite lives cheat it's obvious I am using. It leaves Robin Hood open to the curse of any limited lives puzzle game. If you die 30 minutes in, Then you have to spend the next 30 minutes simply performing what you already know to be the answers just to get back to where you were. Which is a danger here, because the few complete runs on YouTube range from over 40 minutes to the excellently named Yesterzine taking the best part of 90 minutes. If you lost Life 3 at 88 minutes, then you're never finishing this game because the tape is out the nearest window, followed by your joystick and quite possibly the C64. Maybe this is why none of them owned an SX64. Those things don't count. So does the review go further and offer more detail than I've done in 20 minutes? The case for the defence. It's not a good start. The first column and a half are spent waffling about some irrelevant but interesting information about Robin Hood himself. It's only a 2-page 4-column review, so this is a decent proportion of it, and that's usually a bad sign in these trials. In that respect, it doesn't improve, even taking a joke about space being vast from the Hitchhiker's Guide to waste a little more space. The reference here being how far from their doors keys sometimes are because of the vastness of the game. Correct at least, but we're already 3/4 of the way through the text, and all we've covered other than that is a basic overview of the concept of keys and enemies, and the fact you have 3 lives. And that's about it. They mention the game is hard and would be really frustrating without a cheat. In fact, they go ahead and provide that cheat if you have an action replay cart, and I'm very much suggesting they did what I did and gave up on reviewing the game as designed almost immediately. Finally, they describe the controls merely as muddy. They don't elaborate on this even as much as I did, but it's clear what they meant. They do claim to have found places in the game you can get stuck without the ability to backtrack and find the key too. This I've not seen, but I mention it only because it's the only sentence in the review that's new to me. I think we've caught one here. I played this for literally 20 minutes and I could, and pretty much did, write the same review they did. They've spotted exactly one thing I'm not sure I believe that I didn't find in a single artificial extended go of it, and I already recognise almost all the screenshots. And so, with this information, and at the risk of re-angering the Commodore Format masses that I angered by daring to agree with their editor last time, I'm afraid I have to find production editor Dave Golder guilty of lazy reviewing here. His sentence? To finish the game. Without the cheats this time. On the back page, the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge. Always a worthy back page advert candidate is CFCH, but we're here for a special reason. On Saturday 15th of November and Sunday 16th, they're running their excellent Retro Computer Festival Gaming Edition, where some of the best and brightest of the retro community will be showing up and showing off their collections, alongside a fully equipped developer den where they promise some special guests. And in non-special guests, if you care to turn up on Saturday, I'll be there. No Master System this time. I'm leaving the exhibiting to some of my other Big Red Arrow chums. But if you say hi, I have stickers, and I'll be very happy to press some of them into your hand and or stick them on your forehead should you just ask. Get your tickets at computinghistory.org.uk. If they've sold out, or you're not annoyed there's still sticker residue on your forehead, please return here the last week in November, when an as yet undecided magazine is asked to explain what the bloody hell it's playing at. Hopefully I'll see you there. Good night.